Okay, in this session we're going to talk about citing and closing violations in a compliance inspection. So we're going to inspect this 7-Eleven facility in Cranston, and we're going to answer the compliance questions. So each one of the question marks here, or the NA, is backed up by a list of questions, and what we want to do is specify the answer to those questions. So if we drill in here and answer those questions, we've marked them is in compliance for all of these items. If the site is out of compliance, we can drill into one of the areas and we could enter a note specific about one of these issues. So we specifying that they did not keep a list of emergency contacts at the facility. So we could enter an inspector note, list must contain fire, police, and DEM contact information, or whatever is appropriate associated with being more descriptive about why the site is out of compliance. So we save that, and we've cited them for this regulation 802. We close. We can take a look at the tank information at the facility. So we drop this down. We see they've got 3 in-use tanks, and they don't have any closed tanks. If we were to find a tank and mark it as either temporarily closed or permanently closed, then we wouldn't need to answer the questions associated with that specific tank. So in this example, for this diesel tank, we'd have to answer questions about release prevention and the release detection methods that they're using at that facility. If the tank wasn't in use, or if it was pulled, or if it was temporarily closed, we would need to answer the temporary closure questions about being in proper temporary closure, but the other questions would then show NA, which means that they don't need to be answered. They can be answered. So for example, if it's a temporarily closed system but they have some kind of release detection requirements, even though it's temporarily closed, maybe it's temporarily closed but it still has product in the tank or something like that, and they need to keep release detection, you can still answer the questions and you can still cite them for those violations. So the other 2 tanks will still leave in use, in which case we need to answer the questions associated with those. So it looks like they have corrosion protection since it's a fiberglass tank. They have spill buckets, and they have ball floats, and so for both tanks they have all this. If we drill in and specifically cite them for a spill bucket violation, let's say that the spill buckets are in disrepair and cracked, we could cite them for that, and we could cite them for both tanks. So we've answered all the release prevention questions. If we get into the release detection question, we can also answer those. Ideally, there's identified a specific release detection method instead of one of these methods they're going to be required to have monthly requirements for. So maybe if they have interstitial monitoring with secondary containment, then they don't necessarily need to have ATG monthlies. So we could identify the right release detection method and then identify whether or not they're in compliance, and we can do the same for the other tank and answer the compliance questions, as well as for the piping for tank 2 and the piping for tank 1. So we've entered all that information, and we can now choose save, and it says that we haven't answered a specific question for a specific tank. So for tank 1, the piping corrosion protection question, we didn't answer. So we'll answer that, and we'll also answer it for tank 2. We choose save, and it says the inspection has failed. So if we go to the enforcement function, we can identify whether or not they should receive a formal warning, which means they need to send in documentation for proof of compliance, or an informal warning. So if they came into compliance while you were on the facility, you could cite them for an informal warning, identifying that they don't need to send in information to the DEM to come into compliance. But in this case, we'll cite them as formal warning. You could have the facility owner sign. Click here to enter the name of the person who's signing. This will default to the Class A/B operator, but otherwise you could type in a name. And using the tablet, the person who's signing the document could sign here. We save. When you print, usually you choose Save a Copy As, which is going to generate a PDF document and not necessarily print it to a mobile printer. We can choose the person who we want the letter to be addressed to, or you can choose blank and then enter a person's name and address. And so now it's generating that PDF document. And we can do the same for the main inspection report on this screen. Choose Save a Copy As, which is going to generate that PDF document. And we can review which documents are generated in this document and notes section. So we've generated these two documents. Let's say that there's dispensers at the site. Let's say there's 2 dispensers that were installed in, let's say, January of 2000. Save and add another dispenser, and 3, 4. And we can do 2000 and January 1st and save. All right, so when we can answer the questions about the dispensers as well. And since these 2 aren't required, we don't need to answer them. And if the dispensers were installed at a later date, the questions would need to be answered. So if they were installed in 2014, then the compliance requirements would be different associated with that dispenser. But at this point, we can go in and generate the diagram. If we choose this button, it will add the equipment for the currently active tank. So it looks like we have 1 gasoline tank and 2 tanks that I guess are marked as compartment tanks, and that's why the line is through them. So one was the temporarily closed diesel tank, and then there's the 2 gasoline tanks, one of which is a split tank. And we could position the dispensers correctly and add a tank pad and place the tanks on the tank pad. Do a send to back to move that backwards, and if we could draw the piping in the facility and all that. But for now, we're just going to save, and we'll save a snapshot of that, and we'll choose Save. And so the inspection status has failed. We've answered all the questions, we've generated the required documents, so the inspection is completed. So if we choose the synchronization function, that inspection is now going to go to the Plover system, and the inspection ID is 19181, and it is a 7-Eleven facility in Cranston. So if we get back to the Plover system, and we look that up, UST 19181, and search. And we choose this View Add Lust Events. We see that there's a new compliance inspection on the 2nd of May, and Pam was the inspector, and the result is failed. If we choose View here, we can drill in and look at the details associated with the documents that were generated in the facility, as well as the inspection or the violations that were cited. So the same or 220 and a 230 violation, both spill bucket violations were cited for tanks 1 and 2, and then the release response violation was cited for the facility, and we entered a comment for that specific one. So this can be used to now track compliance associated with the facility. And that's it. Thank you.